All right, Shalom. Before I begin this lesson, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Hashem, Ruach HaKodesh. I would like to say double honors to my teachers, the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned this truth from. And also, I'd like to say Shalom and salutations to the elect that's out there preaching this word in truth and sincerity. I'm the brother Shaquat, and I'm one of the brothers from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal, and I'm back with another lesson. And this lesson that I'll be getting into today is going to be a character development lesson, right? And these lessons are always twofold. They're to bring out edification, but also a reminder for whoever is doing the lesson, right? Um, so with that being said, character development, which is a very important thing to you know um, to pretty much possess or have or develop in this truth, right? Um, and it's gonna help you in your day to day life, man. Your day to day uh endeavors, for lack of better words. Because when you have the wisdom of the scriptures, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, right? Especially dealing with the law, statutes, and commandments, which just to add on, the law, statutes, and commandments is not just reserved to the laws of Moses. Um, the laws are all over the scriptures, from the book of Genesis, the Old Testament, the the Torah, obviously, um, the Apocrypha. There's laws in the Apocrypha. There's laws in Sirach. There's laws in the New Testament. Right. So the whole, you know, scriptures as a whole, man, is important. But and in it, it contains laws, man, statutes and commandments. Right. Matter of fact, let me get real quick. Let me get a precept to start off before I keep going. This is the book of First Corinthians 14 and verse 37. Um, but before that, let me get another precept real quick in the book of Matthew 13 and verse 52. It says, Then said he unto them, Therefore every scribe which is instructed unto the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which bringeth forth out of his treasure things new and old, right? So this householder, you know, would pretty much be us, the teachers, and the prophets in this time, right? But the prophets would bring out treasures that of things new and old, and that new and old is referring to the New Testament and the Old Testament, man, right? Because you have some Israelite, uh, well, not I don't know of any Israelites as of late, modern Israelites, but I know in the old school before, you had some branches that were teaching um, in the time of Abba Bivens, man. You had um, Israelites that were only teaching or pushing the Old Testament, and they were disannulling the New Testament. But guess what? The Old and New Testament are important because um, each one, has the words of Yahweh Shemashah in it, man. Each one complements the other, right? That's why the Lord also would paraphrase particular precepts in the Old Testament in the New Testament, right? And I could be corrected, but I remember I think it was Abba Bivens that pretty much introduced the importance of the New Testament. Which is the New Testament is very important. Why? Because our Lord Yahweh Shai is on the scene in the New Testament, right? But the reason why I brought that out is to prove that um, the Old and the New Testament are important, right? You don't just deal with the laws only, but there's also laws in the New Testament as well, right? There's laws, statutes, and commandments in the New Testament as well. Matter of fact, that brings me to this. In the book of First Corinthians 14 and verse 37, it says, if a man think himself, and the book of First Corinthians is Paul, the Apostle Paul, right, which is in the New Testament, right? It says, if a man think himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things that I write unto you are the commandments of the Lord. So I'm going to read that again. It says, First Corinthians 14 and 37, if any man think himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things that I write unto you are the commandments of the Lord, right? So the Apostle Paul was heavy in the spirit. You know, he had a heavy portion in the spirit because Yahushua taught him one on one, right? Yahushua showed him particular things, man. You know, Yahushua supped with him on a intimate level, right? And he was obviously shown a lot more than, you know, the average person that was there, or the average, you know, the other men that were around in that time, right? And you know, which Apostle Paul was a very spiritual individual, right? Um, so some of the things he says in his letters, they are commandments, right? Even though it's not written in the Old Testament, right? It's not mentioned as a commandment specifically per se, but it's still a commandment. You know, it's spiritual advice that's that's commands. You know, if, for lack of better terms, you know, like for example, dishonoring, not having your head covered, prophesying or praying. You know, that's a commandment. Why? Because although it's not written in the laws of Moses, it makes sense. It's important. Why? Because you're dishonoring your head, and our head is Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Yahweh wa Yahweh Shai. So we don't want to dishonor the Heavenly Father and His Son, right? We want to honor Him, and that also ties into the what, to the law that says fear the Most High. You know, that ties into fear, right? So with that being said, um, I'm gonna continue on with the lesson, right? The character development lesson. I'm gonna bring it back, kind of segued there, but character development is something that is very important, right? And this truth in this ministry, because it helps you maneuver, as I mentioned earlier, it helps you better maneuver this society, right? And we need all the help we can get. You know, we really do need all the help that we can get in this society, man. And it will behoove you to have and develop particular character traits that's gonna make your life easier. All right. So this is the book of Sirach 10, or Ecclesiasticus 10, and verse 28. It says, my child, keep your self respect, but remain modest. Right? And it's very important to remain modest. When we look up that word modest, it goes into uh, uh, self, deprecate. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Bear with me. Yeah, okay, so here we go. Modest in the Google. It says, describe someone who is humble, you know, unpretentious, or moderate in their actions and possessions. All right, so it says, my child, keep your self respect, but remain modest. right? Keep your self-respect, but remain humble, right? We know that we're Israelites. We know that we're above these other nations. We know that we're better than these other nations, you know. But knowing that we shouldn't get too puffed up in the head to where you're cussing out everybody. You're looking down upon everybody. Your job site, you're being rebellious because you think that you're better than your boss. But the scriptures speak about in Romans 13 to obey the rulers, right? You know, but by doing that, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, man. Because all the people around you are gonna look at you like, yo, this guy's, and you might get fired. You might get fired. You might not be liked by your coworkers, which is gonna create an unhealthy work environment, right? So you have to remain modest, knowing that you're an Israelite. That's something that you pretty much keep in disguise. But there's a way to do that. There's a way to carry that pride about you of being an Israelite, but still being respectful, towards those that are around you, at your workplace or whatever environment you're in, right? Because you don't have to curse out everybody. You know, the scriptures speak about being kind, and that's obviously, you know, you have to know who you're being kind to. But for the most part, you shouldn't be too proudful. But reading on, it says, "My child, keep yourself respect, but remain modest. Value yourself at your true worth." Right? So yeah, we value ourselves at our true worth. And our true worth is that what we're Israelites and sons of Yahweh. We're the princes of Yahweh. That's our worth, and that's worth a lot, right? In the Sirach, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it speaks about the portion of the Spirit that was given to the nation of Israel, and we were given the greatest portion amongst these other nations, and that's the reason why we excel at everything we do, better than these other nations. It's because the Lord gave us a portion of Spirit, His portion of Spirit that's bigger and more than any other nation, man. Right? And that's our true worth. That's our true value. All right. It says there's no excuse for a person to run himself down. No one respects a person who has no respect for himself. Right. So don't pretty much underrate yourself. Don't undervalue yourself when it comes to particular things, man. Don't look at yourself as low value or high value. And coming into this truth, that's what you come to know, that we're high value, man. Over these other nations. We're not, we're not the bottom, because that's what we're taught in the world, that we are the worst of the worst, which is niggas. It's a stereotype that's put on us to where it's not really the best stereotype, man. It's a stereotype that cultivates low self-esteem in our people, man. You know, in our men, right? But guess what? Coming into this truth, we get exposed to the truth. The light is shed on what the truth truly is, and we get to see it. The Lord opened up our eyes to truly see it, to see that we are the most valuables. All right, so I'm gonna jump from there to the book of Sirach 4, or Ecclesiasticus 4, and verse 20 in the GNT once again. It says, take advantage of opportunities. That's right. And that's, being in the world, you should take advantage of opportunities and not shut them down because you are over righteous, right? Well, it depends on what the opportunity is too, right? If it's an opportunity that's beneficial to your situation, you take that. But if it's not, you don't, right? But you shouldn't turn down each and every opportunity that presents itself to you. that could yield to your benefit, whether that may be a job opportunity, a woman, whatever. You know, it says, but guard yourself against evil. Don't underrate yourself. That's right. Don't underrate yourself. Look up that word underrate, undervalue, right? So we shouldn't undervalue ourselves, you know, being out in the world. This is, there's a sense of pride, for lack of better words, that we're supposed to have about knowing who we are and, the power we serve and the knowledge we possess. But that that has to be done and shown in modesty. Right? That's the balance of it. All right. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying to the elect. I'm gonna end it off there. In closing, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Ruach. Once again, double honors to my teachers, the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Most Home, and shalom and salutations to the elect. Till next time.